Okay, I think it's on.
You have to look there.
I
at
hope
you.
it's on. You can look at me. I hope it's on. It would be better if you looked there, actually.
Better if I look
I'll
there?
tell you what. How about if I...
You should sit over here, maybe.
Now, we just taped what we just said. So let me see if I can... Okay, we'll start now. Today is November 24th, 1994, and it's Thanksgiving Day. First of all, tell us your name.
Ruth Miller.
Okay. And what were your parents' names?
You have to speak a little louder.
What were your parents' names?
Adela and Gedalia Goodman.
And did you have any brothers?
Yes, I had two brothers.
And their names?
One was Solomon, and the other one was Victor.
Did you have any sisters?
I had 3 little brothers and sisters, in addition to the 2 brothers that I mentioned. The oldest one was Sonia, and the second girl was Anita.
Yeah.
Hanusia, excuse me. Hanusia. And the old boy was Avramchik.
Okay, but weren't they your
They were my step children, yes.
stepsisters? Sisters and brothers. Okay. Where did you live with your parents?
Where?
Yeah.
In Yerozhnya, where I was born, in Russia.
Aha. Okay. Tell me a little bit about your memories, some of your memories of life with your parents in Yerozhnya. Yerozhnya?
Yerozhnya.
Yerozhnya.
Well, as far as I can remember, my mother died when I was 6 years old. And I remember many things that have occurred even prior to that. I remember when my mother came back from a trip to Germany, where she used to go annually to take the health baths. And she brought me a very, very beautiful large doll, almost the size of myself. And I remember very well my uncle David, that's my mother's brother, myself and my mother, going for a walk with that big, beautiful doll. And the doll was almost my size. I was holding the doll by one hand, and my mother was holding the doll by the other. And Uncle David was walking alongside of me. I remember that so well. But after that, I do remember when my mother died, they took me to my girlfriend's house, to one of my girlfriend's houses. And I stayed there until, I guess, all the funeral arrangements and everything. And after that, I remember that I lived with my father in our big house. And my father remarried about a year later. Maybe a little more than a year.
How did you feel about your stepmother?
My stepmother was a very nice-looking young woman that lived in our town. And those days, you know, they usually suggested that they recommended to widowers that there was a woman or a girl, whatever. She was a girl, she was never married before. She was much younger than my father. And anyway, it seems that they married and they started to have children, because when I left Russia, actually, I was 17 years old, and my oldest little sister must have been about 8, but unfortunately there was a lot of tragedy there, because the children were all in an epidemic and they all died before I left Russia.
Oh my.
It was a very, very sad story. But I do remember that my oldest sister was about 8 or 9 years younger than I, which means that my father was married about 8 years after then I left, and I don't remember much, except that I do remember when my father died. My father died in 1919 when I was 15 years old. But after that, I remember living with my aunt in Kiev.
Excuse me 1 minute. Take one little break. Please make Sorry for the interruption.
That's all right.
What did your mother die of, and then what did your father die of?
My mother died also during I think it was an epidemic of typhoid.
Typhoid.
So did my father at different times.
Oh my.
It was a different, I think, period of, let's see, my father died in 1919, my mother died in 1910, 9 years later.
And your mother was very young, wasn't she?
She was 32 when she died,
Oh,
and my father was 49 when he died.
So you really had a lot of difficult experiences
Yes,
before
I
you.
did.
Yeah. What was your relationship like with your brothers? Did Sal, my father, your brother, did he live with you and your father?
Well, we all lived together until, after a while, my oldest brother Solomon, he felt that the house we lived in was too small for the whole family with the children. So he gave the house. And this I don't know.
Who's he, your dad?
This was after my father died.
Oh, after your father died, I see.
Sure. And then we moved, I remember we moved to some family that we rented, we rented an apartment or something, partial apartment. And then I remember that my brother Solomon used to travel, but that was even during my father's lifetime. He used to help him out in his business.
Right. What was the business? What did your father?
Was the manufacturer of it's called the essence from which you make vinegar. And he was a very large vinegar distributor. In fact, annually, I remember on the high holidays, my father's picture was attached to every bottle that was sent out throughout the country. In fact, the picture that we have, that's the large picture that's made of the little picture.
Oh yes, I know which picture you mean.
Yes, right.
It hangs in our house. Yeah. So after your father died, you and both of your brothers were really orphans.
Well, I tell you what happened. My brother Solomon started to go to an out-of-town school, and I went to school in a city called Yeticha, where my grandmother, my mother's mother, lived. And I lived there for quite a while going to school, but I used to come back and forth to see the family and all that. But in 1920, my aunt, my mother's sister, who lived in Kiev, the capital of the Ukraine, she wanted me to come to live with her. She wanted to sort of help bring me up. And I came there, and she started immediately to send me to dancing school, and I took piano lessons. But it didn't take too long when I received a letter from my brother Solomon. He was in Odessa at the time, going to school, that we received an invitation to go to America. Our cousins would like us to come and live there.
Oh. You were about how old then?
I was about 16 then, because I was 17 when I arrived in this country. I mean, about that, anyway. So we left Kiev. That is, I left Kiev, and I came to say goodbye to my stepmother and my little brothers and sisters, whom I didn't see any longer because they were already dead after being so sick in that epidemic too.
So
So
they died before you left for America?
Exactly, yes. And
So you couldn't say goodbye to them?
No, I couldn't.
No.
I just said goodbye to my stepmother.
Yes.
And from there I went to the town Yeticha, where my grandparents used to live. And I met a cousin of mine who came along with us to this country. Her name was Helen. And so we came, so then Helen and I met my brother Solomon in Romania, but he arranged everything in advance.
Where was your other brother?
The other brother was in the army, but my older brother was supposed to gotten in touch with him to let him know that we're leaving, and he too should meet us at the border.
Yes.
But they claimed that we really don't know the entire truth. But the way I heard from my older brother, he said that he did try to come, but he was caught and he was killed at the border. But anyway, we had to come in a very secretive way. We traveled in the middle of the night. We slept on a mountain, and then in the middle of the night we had to get on a small little boat and travel across to Romania, where my brother and my cousin from America were waiting for us. So my cousin Helen and I got to there, and we all met. And from then on, of course, there was a lot of work to be done, and we had to get visas. But we lived in Bucharest, Romania, for about a month. Then we went on to Belgium, and we lived in Brussels for about 3 months. And then finally, in October 11th, 1921, we arrived in America. I remember that was Arab Yom Kippur. And we arrived in New York, naturally, and we took the train.
And did you come to Ellis Island?
That's correct. We came to Ellis Island.
Do you remember how you felt when you
Well, I
got to this
country? I remember being questioned and being examined.
But how did you feel? Were you eager to come to this country?
I really didn't know. To tell you the truth, I just didn't know, because I was on the go all my life practically.
Right.
I was traveling from one place to another. But I knew that I was coming to America, where everything would be free for people. I don't mean free of freedom, and we'll be able to do, and we'll not be persecuted.
Did you feel that you were persecuted in Russia?
Well, of course, I remember during the war, when they were, I was there during the First World War. So during that war, we were hiding. My father was still alive. We were hiding in the cellars. They didn't have any shelters, like they do these days. We were hiding in cellars. And I remember they were looking for the Jews to do bad things for them. They had a lot of pogroms. They killed a lot of Jews in our town, and not primarily in a town not far from us called Proskuro. But
how, when you say that you had cousins who sent you the money, how did it happen? Didn't one of the cousins come to Russia to give the money?
The story goes as follows. My oldest brother Solomon told me once that my father, he was an affluent man, he helped these cousins to start their trip to America. It seems that he had given or loaned money to 2 of the members of the family who left first. They left before the First World War. And they came and they brought the rest of the family out. But then later on, when they heard that both of my parents were gone, they said, oh my, and the children now don't have parents. We must do something. And they decided to bring us over. But how did they find out? Through my friend. I had a girlfriend, a Russian girlfriend by the name of Sonia Gelman, who later on married, and her name was Sonia Zan. Her mother wrote a letter to Washington to my cousins, and that's when they said they found out, and they started the ball rolling, so to speak.
Okay, what are some of your early memories? Well, first you came to New York. Where did you go when you arrived?
No, we didn't stay in New York at all.
Oh.
We got on a train, a Pennsylvania Railroad train, where there was a lady there that was arranged by the cousins that met us, and we went all the way to Washington, and they brought us straight to our cousin's home. And I remember my brother going with my cousin's father to the synagogue, being it was Arab Yom Kippur. So, and of course from then on it was...
Yes, go ahead.
Well, from then on, of course, we were introduced, to a lady by the name of Mabel Benson. We were told that she was the wife of a senator, but she was a very gracious lady, and she taught English to foreigners. So she was our first teacher. And she was very nice, and I recall now, we arrived in October, and December, she gave me for Christmas a miniature little book of As You Like It by Shakespeare. And she inscribed it to my friend and pupil. Now, to my dear friend Ruth, she changed my name, by the way, from Rosa to Ruth. And she signed it from her teacher and friend, Mabel Benson, and I still have that little book.
Oh, that's lovely.
It's
That's
a miniature thing, yeah.
Mhm. What are some of your early memories? You were living in Washington.
When I remember first starting going to school, and then this was 1921 October, and about 6 months later, in 1922, I got a job, Landsberg Brothers. It's a department store, and I worked in the stockroom to mark merchandise. They felt that while my English was pretty good, but not good enough to communicate in English. But then, about 3 months later, I was transferred to their linen handkerchiefs and scarf department.
So in 9 months, you were speaking English quite well.
Fairly well. I wouldn't say good, but I used to take names and addresses, people who had charge accounts.
Yes.
So I had to take that, and I used to write it out. And I had no complaints. So
Did you know any English in Russia?
no, we never taught. We were taught German and French in school, but never English.
Did you live with your cousins?
Where, in Washington?
Yes.
Yes, for a while. For a while we lived there. But then later on, my cousin and I got an apartment on our own. We lived right across the street from the Congressional Library. Very lovely neighborhood.
Which cousin?
My cousin Helen.
Oh, you lived with Helen. That's right. You went over to
When then Helen went to New York, she had a cousin that invited her to come and stay with her. So then later on we reunited in New York. But while she was in New York, Ben Golden, another cousin of the Soroses, his parents were also involved. It seems that they were involved in giving some money towards our trip. But anyway, they were very friendly. And when she left us, so Ben's mother said, how about come and live with us? So I lived with them for a short time. And then, as a matter of fact, I remember that Ben took his mother for a ride to New York, like for 2 days over July 4th weekend, and he asked me to come along. So I said, of course, I'd be delighted. I mean, remember we stayed in New York on 44th Street at the Piccadilly Hotel, and I needed a belt. So I said to them, is it all right if I go to one of the department stores here? He said, of course. And I walked into Kimball Brothers to look for a belt. And as I was looking through the directory, I saw employment department. And I said, gee, maybe I go up and see if I can get a job here. And I did. I went up, and a very nice gentleman by the name of Mr. Woods greeted me very nicely. And he said, what can I do for you, young lady? I said, well, I told him the story, how I happened to be here. And he said, look, this is October. It's very slow. But in December, we get very, very busy. If you come back in December, I'll give you a job. And so it happened. I came and I got my job.
But then, well, I'm a little mixed up. First of all, you came over with Sal. What did you call my dad? You didn't call him Solomon.
Syama.
Okay, you came over with Syama. Where did he live when you were living with Helen?
Syama went to New York earlier.
Oh, so
That's where he
you were
met-
in Washington and he went to New
He
York.
went to New York earlier. Sure.
I see.
Because when we arrived in New York, we already met your mother.
Oh, so
That's Syama's wife.
Syama had already met his
Yeah.
wife-to-be. He wasn't married
He
yet.
knew her from before, but
Yes, reunited.
reunited there, yeah, yeah.
So he was courting her, but he was not married yet.
No. Of course, I was at the wedding.
Right,
They were
that's-
married in 1924, and I was already in New York in 2 years.
I see. So that's interesting that he came to New York and you stayed in Washington.
Because he had a special position that offered to him. You know.
I see.
He had ideas of going to school and all that, and he also had in mind of going to New York earlier.
Mm-hmm. It wasn't hard for him to leave you because I know he was very protective of you.
I didn't get that.
Wasn't he very protective of you?
Yes, but he said, you knew at that time I'm not a baby anymore.
Right, right.
And I was with family all, I wasn't
Right.
alone.
So then you moved to New York,
Yes.
and you worked at Gimbel Brothers.
When I moved to, when I came for the job, at that time my cousin Helen was already there, and we got in touch with each other, and we got a very nice apartment, and not too far from where we used to live recently, in Brooklyn. And we lived there for quite a while. She used to go to work, she had already gotten a job, and I used to work at Gimbel Brothers. And I worked there from 1922 till 1936.
Oh my, 14 years.
In the interim, a lot of things happened when I worked at Gimbel.
Okay, well, tell us some of them.
Well, one of the things is I learned the language there, and the buyer, her name was Mrs. Walters, took a liking to me. She had a son. So when I came, she said to me, she says, I have a son, I have no daughters, but I like you. Almost like if you were my daughter. Well, I thanked her, and of course I did everything to please her, because this was my nature, to do the things I was told to do. Well, anyway, after she, I'm trying to remember, she used to go to Europe every year to buy merchandise. Buyers those days traveled to Europe to buy things. And she traveled each time she came back. She would always tell me stories, and it really made me feel very good. And then, this was the 19th. Then she left. She left Gimbel Brothers. She was older. And we got another buyer who was also very nice. But this Mr. Woods, who originally hired me actually, approached me about 4 or 5 years after I worked there, and he wanted me to go to Philadelphia as an assistant buyer in Gimbel Brothers in the silverware department. Well, the family, including my brother, that time of course he was married already, the family said to me, where are you going to go alone there in Philadelphia? Here you got the family, you got friends, and they talked me out of it. So I remained in Gimbel's, and of course I stayed there till 1936, but in 1932 I was awarded a very, very luxurious prize. There was a salesmanship contest, and I won the contest of the entire store, and I went to Paris and London with another runner-up girl, younger than myself. I was 28 at the time, and she was 18. I worked in the silverware, she worked in the handkerchief department. But we got along very well, and this was a very exciting trip. We went first class, going and coming. We lived in fine hotels in Paris and in London. We got very, very nice, luxurious gifts. And it really is, I have some souvenirs, I have some pictures and things. Bring memories.
We saw the pictures and you look like a movie star. What are some of your memories? 1 minute. What are some of your memories of, how would you call those happy years for you? What was it like? It was a big adjustment.
It's hard to tell, actually. They were happy, and they were not so happy for this reason, that I always missed my mom.
Mm. Yeah, well that's...
And I remember, we never had it in Russia. When it came to Mother's Day, I used to go into the back of the store and cry.
Oh.
And then I said to myself, I'd love to get married, so I'll have a mother.
Mm.
That's how it was.
Well, that's being very honest. So that was just always something that you missed in your life.
So then later on, of course, after I met my husband, Maurice, in 1942, and I was married in 43, then my life began. I was very happy from then on because he was a very good man. He was very good to me, and we enjoyed things we did together. And then, of course, I also became very active in organization work, and that took up a lot of my time, but I was interested in it, and it seems all those things made me happy.
Mm-hmm.
I would usually say that my happiness really began, I would say, in about well, when I was about 35 years old.
And that's when you got married, when you were
No, I
30?
got married, I was 39. But
Oh.
at that time, I was sort of preparations already here and there. Say around that time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I wasn't unhappy all the time.
Right.
I used to go out and have fun and all
Yes.
that, travel and go on vacations. But when you say the word happy, a lot of people do those things and they're not happy.
Right, right. How did you meet Uncle Maurice?
Well, that's a long story. Uncle Maurice was an insurance broker and an accountant.
Mm-hmm.
And he used to do business with a lot of people. He knew a man that your grandmother knew very well. And one day he saw me in your grandmother's house. And he asked her who I was. She told him, that's my son-in-law's sister. He said, well, he said, I have a very nice man that might be interested in her. So she said, she told, I think she told your father about it, or I really don't remember how it happened. But somebody gave him my number, and he called me up to the office. And I remember he had a very good sense of humor. And the first telephone call, he made me laugh. And I said, gee, it must be fun to be with a man like that. And that's how it started. He took me out on the first date. We went to see a movie. I remember the name of the movie. It was called The Ball of Fire with Lucille Ball. And after that, we went to some place and we had some refreshments. And he took me home. And he told me all about his family, but he particularly raved about an uncle of his who lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. He was an unusual man. He came to this country very poor. He settled there. He opened a large fur business eventually, became wealthy. He supported all causes, was active in every Jewish community. He made Ann Arbor Jewish. They didn't know what Jewish meant there.
What was his name?
His name was Ozias Zwerdling.
Mm-hmm.
Zwerdling. He had 3 brilliant sons.
Mm-hmm.
Later on, we became very close with the entire family.
But this, you heard all this on your first date?
Well,
your
not
first
all
or your
of it,
second,
not
but
all of
you
it.
started
He
here.
told me about his uncle.
Mm-hmm.
And as a matter of fact, when we were married in April, that Thanksgiving of that, was it that year or the year after, he took me to Ann Arbor, Michigan to meet his uncle and the family.
Did you have any idea the first day or night, evening that you went out with Uncle Maurice that he would become your husband?
I didn't, let me see.
Did you have any idea on your first date
Yeah.
that Maurice Miller might become your husband someday?
Well, look, after all, it's the first, but he asked me for a date right away. He said to me, do I bowl? I said, no, I never went bowling before. He said, we're going to go bowling next time. And we met a certain good friend of his, also from Manchester, England. By the way, I didn't mention that Maurice came from Manchester, and he had most of his education in England, except that he finished here by getting his accountant's degree at New York University. And but he had a very good background that he brought with him from England. And he had a friend by the name of Lionel Marcus, who was a nephew of Louis Golding, the author. And he was very friendly with him, and he said, Lionel Marcus, a friend of mine, is going to bring a girl, and the 4 of us will go together bowling. I said, well, that sounds nice. Well, we went bowling several times, and each time we came, Lionel Marcus brought a different girl. Finally, 1942, we were married in 43. This was before we were married. In 1942, this Lionel was drafted to go to service. And he came back, and the first time we came back, we went bowling. And he brought with him a different girl entirely. And then later on, he married that girl, and we were the only witnesses there because it was performed in Rabbi Leventhal study. It was during the war. He had to go back It was very interesting. I had some very interesting events in my lifetime.
Well, what's a very interesting one that stands out in your mind?
Well, you mean after I was married, the first incident, of course we had many happy times together when we traveled all over, but I remember very, very well our first trip to Israel. Well, people used to say when you come there, you kiss the ground. And then when we arrived there, and I remember seeing people actually falling on the ground, kissing the ground. There's a lot of memories. You try to think what is the most important. I remember when on the trip that I was awarded in Gimbal many years prior.
Yeah. Excuse me 1 minute. I'm sorry, this is not a professional production here. Yes, you were saying?
I would say that prior to the trip that Gimbel Brothers awarded me, that I went to.
Yes.
No, I'm trying to remember which one was it, prior or after. Well, anyway, there's so many things going through my mind that, well, yes, I do remember when we arrived in Paris. They had all the department stores, both in England and in London and in Paris, entertained us. But one particular one was outstanding. The one in London is called, I think, not Harrods.
Selfridges?
Selfridge.
Selfridge.
Selfridge's department stores entertained us. That the head of Selfridge's came, they met us with a group of people. They took us to their store, and I think we had refreshments, and then we went to play tennis in their country club. I didn't know how to play tennis, but I raised the racket anyway.
Let me take you back to when you were married, and you said those were very happy years for you. When you were married,
Yes.
were very happy years for you.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Right from the start.
That's very nice. What was your relationship? You and Uncle Maurice did not have children.
We didn't talk about it at the beginning, but later on, I realized I was already nearing 40, and I said, gee, Maurice said to me, do you want to first enjoy it together? I said, look, Maurice, it's either, I don't know, I said, maybe it's too late for me. Somehow I was afraid that it's too late to have children at that time. He said, that's up to you. So that's how it was. And of course, when the years went by, somebody said to me, would you like to adopt a child? I said, those days maybe it wasn't like it is today. I said, if you can't have your own, I don't think I would want to adopt to take care of another person's child.
But you were yes, go ahead.
Because I myself, having had a childhood that wasn't, while my mother was alive, I know we all had governesses. My father was well-to-do. We had a very affluent household, and we had a cook and a maid and everything. But then later on, after my mother died, it sort of was a different story. So maybe all those things
influenced you.
And I realized that if I would have had a childhood right through, now I very often see people talk about, my mother taught me how to cook, my mother taught me I got to see my mother. I don't remember all that, because I was too young to remember them. So those things...
But what was your relationship with your nieces and nephews and your brother and your sister-in-law?
You mean on my husband's side?
No, on your side.
But what do you mean my nieces? Oh, you mean my brother's children?
Yes, your brother's children.
My brother's children, very close. First of all, we always lived together, more or less. When I was single, I lived with my brother, and I lived with my nieces and nephews. I felt as though they're my own little brothers and sisters. And then after that, when I was married, we got married, got an apartment in the same building. in fact, on the same floor, and we always were with each other. We sort of felt that we were part of. We just didn't feel as though we were that we were just not the same. We were the same.
You were like an extended family. It was like one family.
That's exactly how we felt. And up to this day, I feel that way.
So in a way, you do have children.
Well, it's true. That's true. But at that time, when we planned it, I didn't know it was going to work out this way.
This is true. This is true. Now, you said you started to say that you got involved in organizations. What would you say? Where did you put your energy and your intelligence?
What was before I was married, I was working all the time, so I had no time to do any kind of volunteer work. But when I got married, somebody invited me to a couple of lectures and things that was sponsored by different organizations. And I attended and I enjoyed them. But I heard so much and I started to read so much about different things, especially we were married in 43, and then 46, 47, they were talking about partition of Palestine. And I said, there's so much to be done there. And we started and I came in once to your mother's apartment, and I saw an invitation to a Hadassah meeting, because your mother had already been a member there. And the invitation read that Rabbi Halpern was going to review a book, Blessed is the Match, by Marie Serkin. And I said, well, I must go to that meeting. I'm going to hear the book.
Keep talking.
Anyway, I went. I enjoyed the meeting. I became a member. And this was in 1947, September 1947. In 48, the month of April, the president of the group approached me. Well, I'd like to have a chairmanship of Jewish National Fund. That means to send out tree certificates and all that. I said, I don't know anything about it. I said, I'm only in the group such a short, but she said, I know you type. I said, that's true. That's all, you're in. You're in. And I became, that was in 1948. I became. P.S. 1949, I became president of the group. And of course, I served for 2 years as president. Then, of course, I became active on the chapter level. See, those days we had groups and chapters and regions. Now we only have chapters and regions. So what happened was that I decided to just maybe take it a little easier. Well, my husband, Maurice, was very cooperative, very supportive. When I had to stay up late or go to meetings, don't worry, we'll go out to dinner, don't worry. I mean, he made it very easy for me. So anyway, that's what happened. I became active, involved first in group and then in chapter, a little bit in region, and later on I even attended national meetings.
So you believed very strongly in what you believed very strongly in what Hadassah was doing.
Oh yes, very much so. As a matter of fact, in 1972, I was asked to be president of the chapter. And they'd been asking me prior, and I said, no, that's too much responsibility. I had 11 groups under me at the time. So finally, Anna Heckelman, of blessed memory, a very active, very intelligent woman, got after me. And one day she got a hold of Rabbi Halpern. They came over to me, and Rabbi Halpern said to me, Ruth, if you take the presidency, I'll install you. That clicked it. Anyway, I became president of Central Chapter, and Rabbi Halpern did come to install me.
So in many ways, your working for Hadassah was like your job.
That was my life practically.
Really?
I used to sit up, after I gave up presidencies, I took every chairmanship. I was chairman at the chapter level of all jobs that took up a lot of time, like journal, a lot of work involved. You contact people and prepare the journal and so on. I did that for a number of years. But then, as a matter of fact, I was active in Hadassah, I can honestly say, till the day I left Brooklyn to move to Martin's Run.
Which was when?
That was, I left in March 1993. I arrived in Pennsylvania then.
Yes.
And I actually was active in Hadassah until I could say a month before I asked the women to come and take along the journal papers. I can't finish them. I'm moving.
So March 1993 was about a year and a half ago. And that's when
Well,
you...
it's almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years.
So my year and 9 months.
Right.
Don't forget, it's December, January, February. We were in March 9th.
Right. And that's when you and my mother,
Yes.
Gert,
Arrived, yes.
arrived.
At Martin's around here.
Yes. And that brings us to now. And now you are how many years old?
No, I was 90 last year.
You were 90.
Last February. That
You
is.
were 90 in
year.
February 1994.
94, right.
Okay, so you're soon looking forward to being 91.
I look forward to it. I'll
And
take each year as it comes.
what word do you have any wise words to pass along based on your many years of wisdom and how to lead a long life? You've learned a lot.
My first is, I would advise people to make the best of things, not to complain so much about things. I don't mean just things that are happening now, but years back, even back, I know that even being active in organizations, having met so many people and see different types of people, different reactions, I would say that people, as they say, there is, I think you would know it better than I because you speak Hebrew better than I. Something that when you're happy with your love.
Yes, how happy is he who is happy with his
With his
lot?
lot, yeah.
Something like that,
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yes,
A person shouldn't complain.
okay.
Do the best you can under the circumstances.
Mm-hmm. And how do you feel today?
How I feel physically?
In every way, in every way.
Well, I would say for my age, I would say I'm grateful. Even though I'm not 100% physically,
Mhm.
but when I see others, I'm pretty grateful to God that I have lived to see this day, as they say, and they say they make the Shechianu.
Right,
This is how I very often do.
okay. So you're grateful
Even today,
that you're
when I
here.
light the candles on Friday night, I make a Shechianu.
Well, I think we're going to stop here, and maybe sometime we can even do a little bit more of this. But this was
I don't know what more, but I guess if they dig in, you can't remember everything.
No, you can't remember 90 years.
Unless you let's say you were born on this and this day. Where were you from this day to this day? And you stop thinking, and then you continue. Otherwise, it's impossible. You skip a lot.
Well, and also we don't have. It would take a long time to remember 90 years. So we were really trying to remember some of the highlights and some things that were the.
All I know is that now you knew Uncle Maurice.
Of course, I
He had
did
a very,
well.
very good sense of humor. He's also very good natured. There isn't anything, if I would want, that I couldn't get from him. And I never wanted to take advantage of him because of his good nature.
Well, what I remember is that he was crazy about you.
Well, he's very proud of me, put it this way.
Yes.
Very proud. Like, for instance, if he would come to I remember when Rabbi Halpern installed me as president of Central Chapter. He ran right to the dais to kiss me, congratulate me, the first one. Or, for instance, when I was president of Central Chapter, and I gave the report of the year at the Pierre Hotel, they had some very prominent people. Dr. Miriam Freund, the national, was the guest speaker, and when I got finished, he came right over and he handed me flowers.
Oh, that's very sweet. Okay, well, we're going to stop here, and thank you very much. We're getting ready to have
This was a total surprise for me.
Well, I hope this came out fairly well, and we're getting ready now to have Thanksgiving dinner with
I'm
you.
looking forward to it. That's
With
what I
you.
really came for. This is something. What is this, a plus?
Well, I just want to say that we're going to be having Thanksgiving dinner with you, with your sister-in-law Gert, who's my mother, who's also 90, with Marsh, my husband, with Molly, his mother, with Karen and Kenny, and
Your children?
yes, my children. And did I leave anyone out? 9 of us. I think I included them. Oh, and Shosh and David.
And David.
Right, my brother David and his wife Shosh are here for Thanksgiving. Well, thank you very much.
You're all a great bunch.
Thank you.
And I love you all.
We love you too.
I never dreamed that this would come.